In this video, we're going to break down how to do a bridge and a bridge kickover. Before they start moving on to this skill, they must already be able to do a handstand against the wall and be able to do the splits too. If they can't already do the splits, there is another video you can follow. If they can't go all the way down, it's not the end of the world, but the lower you can go, the easier the bridge kickover will be in the future. Next, we're just going to work on some flexibility exercises to help with our bridge. So Maya's going to push her armpits down into the ground, try and look forwards at her hands, and it's going to stretch her shoulders, ready for when she moves into the bridge. I recommend trying to hold that for around 30 seconds just so they get a good stretch and try and improve their flexibility. The other stretch we've got is a seal stretch. So Maya's going to put her hands on the floor. From there, she's going to push her stomach into the ground, trying to keep her feet together, and this is going to stretch her abs, ready for when she moves on to a bridge. The first exercise we've got is a crab. So Maya's going to lift her hips up as high as she can, and she's going to keep her arms nice and straight. This is going to help with her core strength for her bridge, and also with her shoulders as well for pushing their arms nice and straight when they do their bridge. Next, we're going to start working on the actual bridge. So Maya's going to put her arms straight for me, and then from there, you're going to tell them to bend their arms and get their arms right by their ears. From here, she's going to keep her arms bent the whole time to start, and she's just going to lift her hips, trying to keep her legs nice and tight when she does it, and keeping her core nice and strong, ready for when she moves on to a full bridge. The next exercise we're going to do is just the full bridge with a little bit of support. So Maya's going to bend her legs. She's going to have her legs wide to start off with because that'll make it a little bit easier. She's going to bring her arms into her ears. She's going to lift her hips up. You're going to put your hand on her lower back, and then she's going to lift her shoulders up, and you can hold her in bridge. Once they're confident at that, they can then bring their feet together, and the aim is to try and push their armpits towards the wall as much as possible. So when we move on to bridge kickovers and backward walkovers, they'll find that skill a lot easier moving forwards. The next exercise we're going to do is a bridge rock. So Maya's going to push into a bridge now, and what she's going to do, you're going to encourage the gymnasts to do is bend their legs and push their shoulders this way, and then push back that way. And this is going to help them ready for when they do their bridge kickover. She can do a few more for you. Really try and stretch your armpits as far as you can. If they find this easy, you can move their feet a little bit closer to their hands, and then they can push their shoulders even further forwards when they do it. Next, Maya's going to do a bridge with one leg. This is going to get them comfortable, ready for when they're doing their kickover, balancing on one leg on the floor. And then once they're good at that, they can then try bridge leg kicks with a bit of speed, ready for when they move on to their bridge kickovers. The straighter leg they can do it, the better it'll be, trying to get her legs nice and wide when she does it. Once they can do the bridge, we're going to move on to the walkover now. So Maya is going to go into a pike handstand. From there, she's going to get her fingers nice and close to the block. She's going to lift one leg up. She's going to think about getting her legs as wide as possible when she does this. This is going to help for when she does her walkovers in the future. This is also going to help with her shoulder strength for when she moves on to backward walkovers and bridge kickovers. Once they can do their split handstand and their bridges, we're going to start trying to build the gymnast's confidence. So what Maya's going to do in a minute is she's going to kick into a split handstand against the wall. From there, she's going to hold it for 5 seconds just to help build her strength, and then she's going to step down with one foot and then land with her legs apart like you would in a backward walkover. So she's going to go from here, kick into a nice split handstand, and then from there, she's going to step back and stretch up smart. Once they're confident at doing that with your coach, you can then try this on their own. So she's going to kick up, legs nice and wide, and then stretch up. Next, we're going to teach them how to do a bridge with their feet onto a higher surface. This is going to help when they move on to their bridge kickover. Some gymnasts may find this difficult, but don't worry, if you give them a little bit of help to get up, that's absolutely fine. So Maya's going to lift her hips, put her feet on the end, put your hand on their lower back and their neck, and just try and get them comfortable at holding a bridge with their feet up. And once she's done, she can tuck her head in, put her back on the floor, and then have a rest. Once they're comfortable in bridge with their feet up, we're going to start moving on to the bridge kickover. So there's a few things to think about when they do a bridge kickover. Firstly, I'd start by getting them to do a few rocks before they go into their kickover. Then they can think about their armpits pushing towards the other way, ready for them to flip over. Also, try and get their legs nice and wide when they're doing their kickover, as this will make it look a lot nicer and make it a lot easier for the gymnast. So Maya's going to lift her hips up again. She's going to straighten her arms. From there, she's going to do 3 rocks. She's going to push 1, 2, then on 3, she's going to kick her legs wide and then stretch up. Once she has done, let's say 3 of these, she can then try on her own if she's nice and safe and you're doing it with a little bit less support, and then you can then start to gradually build the blocks lower onto a lower surface. So that's what we're now going to show you. Once the gymnast is confident, like I said in the previous part, doing it with the 2 blocks, you can then move it onto a lower surface. So Maya's going to push into another bridge, Again, we're going to start with the rock, so she's going to rock 3 times. 1, 2, then on 3 she's going to kick over and land. And then you can start to spot the gymnast just by hovering over their hips, and then once they're ready they can try on their own. So Maya's going to have a go at bridge kickover on her own now. So she's going to put her feet on the block, hands where they need to go, push her hips up into a nice bridge, and from there she's going to do a couple rocks, and then she's going to kick her foot over her head, keeping her legs nice and wide, and then stretching up nice and smartly. So as I said before, once the gymnast has done it around 3 times in a row, you can move on to the floor or the next lower surface. So now we're going to move onto the floor with Maya. She's going to go into her bridge. I'm just going to spot her. She's going to try it on her own. She's going to do a couple rocks first. And when she's ready, she's going to kick over and then stretch up nice and smart at the end. Once the gymnast is confident at doing their bridge kickover, we can then start to looking at the back bend, which is the first part of the backwards walkover. With the back bend, it is quite dangerous, so you need to take your time when you're teaching the gymnast this one. The first exercise we're going to do is we're going to walk down the wall into bridge, and then we're going to walk back up. When they start this exercise, when they first start learning, I'd get their gymnast to start with the legs nice and wide. You can hold their lower back and their shoulders, and from here Maya's going to bend down into the wall, walk her hands down, hold the bridge for a few seconds, and then she's going to walk back up the wall. Not only is that going to help the back bend, that's also going to help when you move on to forward walkovers, when you're going to learn to stand up in the future. Once the gymnast is confident with doing it support, you can then spot them. So Maya's going to do it on her own now with her legs wide, walking down into her bridge, trying to push her armpits towards the mat, and then walking back up the wall again, and then finishing up with her arms by her ears. Another exercise we can do to build the gymnast's confidence is we can go onto their knees, and from there Maya is going to touch the floor and then sit back up. This is quite good for their flexibility as well as their confidence, and once they can do it with the mat with support, we can then take the mat away and they're doing half a back bend from their knees, and it's a little bit safer as well, so you don't go from all the way up in standing up, and you don't have to put so much pressure on their arms when they're first learning a back bend. If the gymnast starts to find the back bend on their knees easy, you can then get them to get their knees together, and this is going to help them with their walkover further down the line. So Maya's going to go down, touch the floor, and then lift back up. And I'll quickly show you on her own. The more control you do this, the better. So if you do it nice and slow, good, and back up. When she does this, she wants to try and push her hips towards the wall over this way, and looking at her hands the whole time, keeping her body nice and tight when she does her kickover. Once they're confident at doing it on their knees, we're going to move on to their feet. So Maya's going to put her legs nice and wide when she starts now, even wider if you can, because they're going to be a little bit nervous to start off with. Again, they're going to start with their arms by their ears, looking at their hands. She's going to push her hips forwards again into the back bend. From there, she's going to go onto the mat, and then on 3, and then push back up. If they're finding that a little bit scary, you could build the mats up even higher to make it a little bit safer, and that will make them feel a little bit more confident. And if they can do that, we can then move on to the next step. When they're first learning their backwards walkover or back bend into kickover, I'd recommend starting on a crash mat first, just to keep them nice and safe. Again, she's going to think about keeping her legs nice and wide when she does it, and you can just stand there to start off with, so she can go back bend, then kick over when she's done her rocks. Good. And once she's confident at doing a nice soft mat, we can then look at making the mat a little bit thinner, just so she's still confident at doing it, and then eventually she can move onto the floor. So now Maya has done it onto the mat, we're going to move onto the floor, so she's going to keep her legs nice and wide again to start. We're going to start with her arms by her ears, and we're going to do exactly the same thing as what we just done, from there, and then stand back up. If they can't stand up for this bit, it's not the end of the world, so this is for a backwards walkover. So the main focus here is going back onto her feet. Once she's confident at doing it with the coach, we can then go to spotting it. So just from here, she'll go on her own and then stand back up. Good. And again, once we're ready, she can then try on her own. Perfect. We're going to do a very similar exercise to the last one, but instead of having their legs apart, they can gradually, as they get more confident, get their feet closer and closer together. So Maya's going to, again, start with her arms up. We're going to go with feet together. And from there, again, she's going to go into her back bend. And then on 3, 1, 2, 3, she can do her kickover. Again, once she's done that around 3 or 4 times and she's nice and confident and she's showing control when she goes down, not going down nice and fast, you can then look at spotting her and then stepping away ready for her to do it on her own. Once she can do her back bend into kickover with some bridge rocks, you can then think about taking the bridge rocks away. So she's going to go back bend now, straight into a kickover without doing the 3 rocks at the start. So she's going to go here, back bend and kick over. And then she'll start to get a little bit more of the feeling of what an actual backwards walkover will feel like. Once the gymnast is confident at doing a back bend and a bridge kickover, we're now going to look at putting them together. Again, we're going to start with support. So Maya's going to start with her legs nice and wide again. And she's going to start with her arms by her ears, looking at her hands the whole time. From there, you're going to support them into the bridge, nice and slowly. Then she can go 3 rocks. 1, 2, 3, then kick over. Keeping her legs nice and wide when she kicks over, trying to keep her legs nice and straight. Once she's confident at that, we can then look at spotting it. So Maya's going to go again. Again, she's going to start with her legs nice and wide. Arms by her ears the whole time, as that's going to make the walkover look nicer. And you can just spot it, and just do 3 rocks, and then kick over. Once she's fully confident at doing this, you can then step away, but be careful with the back bends as it's quite dangerous, and you don't want them to hurt their arms if they go too fast down onto their hands. Once they can do their back bend with their feet together, we're then going to introduce going in from 1 foot. So Maya, as you can see here, has put her foot on something higher, and when she does her walkover, what she's going to think about doing is getting her shoulders all the way on top of her hands. So when she does her walkover, if you watch closely, her shoulders will be pushing this way, not this way, or she's going to fall over. So she's going to go into her walkover, pushing her armpits over, just so she can travel this way when she does her backwards walkover. Once the gymnast has done this with support, we can then look at spotting them. So Maya's going to go into her walkover with her leg on the block, into her kickover, pushing her armpits towards the wall. Once she's ready, we can then step away and she can try it on her own. So again, with nice straight leg at the start, trying to squeeze her leg muscles, looking at her hands, and then she's going to kick her foot over, push her armpits that way as far as possible. Once she's confident at that, we can then look at doing it on the floor. Now there's a couple ways we can support this. So the first way, which I would recommend, is grabbing their hips, so you've got their whole body weight when they do it. So Maya's going to stand here. Again, she's going to start with her arms up, 1 leg in front. You're going to put your right hand, if you're right-handed, on her left hip, and then your other hand is going to go on the opposite hip. From there, she's going to look at her hands, do her kick over, and then stretch up nice and smart. If they're a little bit more confident, like Maya, you can just put 1 hand on their shoulder and 1 hand on their lower back. So she can go from here and then kick over, keeping her legs nice and straight and stretching up nice and smart. And that will just help build their confidence, ready for them to try it on their own. Once the gymnast has done it with support, we can then start to look at shadowing them. So what we're going to do this time, as the coach, you're going to put your hand on their lower back, and then you're going to put your other hand on their leg, just to help them over. And from here, she's going to go into her walkover, and then they'll be doing it slightly more on their own in this way. When you're doing your walkovers, there's lots of different ways you can support. It just depends on their age, ability and size. So if you're a little bit smaller for the gymnast, it's a bit easier just to grab their hips and go over. But if they're a little bit more confident like Maya, then I'd recommend maybe the one we just done. Once the gymnast can do it with support and being spotted, they can then move it on their own. I would do it on a mat. It just depends how you want to do it. So some people have softer mats, it's a little bit safer, but it can be a little bit harder to do. But Maya's going to show you now. Good, and like I say, if you want a bit of a firmer mat to do it on, that might be a little bit easier when they're moving on to it. Once they're safe on the mat and they can do it 3 or 4 times in a row, we can then look at doing it on the floor. Again, she'll be nice and confident now because she can do it on her own. Just like so, keeping her legs nice and straight again, keeping her legs wide in the walkover. Hopefully by the end of this video, with all the breakdowns, you should be able to teach a backwards walkover from start to finish.